She was fired. On the very same day, her brother, who had Down syndrome, had finally learned to fold perfect towels. No one knew, except for the millionaire who overheard everything from his library. This isn't just another story about following the rules. It's about what happens when those rules are broken for the sake of love, and what happens when someone sees everything. Olivia Ramirez was 38 years old and had three certainties in her life. First, her job as a housekeeper at the Hawthorne estate was the only thing keeping her afloat. Second, her 24-year-old brother Matthew, who had Down syndrome, was the only family she had left. Third, if she lost her job, she lost everything. And that Thursday, May 15th at 2:47 p.m., all three of those certainties came crashing down in less than 3 minutes. If you've ever felt like the world was against you, that one wrong decision could destroy everything you've worked for, then you'll understand what Olivia felt when the head housekeeper shouted those words. But let's rewind a bit, because this story actually begins 23 days earlier, and it begins with an impossible decision. Olivia had been working at the Hawthorne estate for 3 years, an 8-bedroom mansion in Bel Air Crest, with gardens that looked like they were ripped from the pages of a European magazine, Italian marble floors that reflected light like mirrors, and a kitchen bigger than the entire apartment Olivia shared with Matthew back in Echo Park. It was a good job, the best she'd ever had, $2,000 a month, from 6 in the morning to 8 at night, 6 days a week. Mr. Hawthorne, the owner, was a busy man, CEO of a luxury hotel chain, 58 years old, a widower. He was almost never home, and when he was, he locked himself in his second-floor library, or was on video calls that lasted for hours. Olivia saw him maybe twice a week. A polite greeting, a courteous smile, nothing more. But there was someone else in that house. Someone who did see Olivia every single day. Mrs. Brenda Harding, head housekeeper, 52 years old, responsible for supervising all the household staff. Olivia, the gardener, the cook, the chauffeur, the cleaning assistant. Brenda was one of those people who measured their worth by how much control they exerted over others. Obsessed with rules. The towels had to be folded in thirds, never in half. The dishes had to be stacked with the logo facing up. The windows were cleaned on Tuesdays and Fridays, never any other day. No exceptions, no flexibility, and the most important rule of all, repeated every 2 weeks during the staff meetings: no one can bring visitors to the house, ever, under no circumstances. Olivia had never broken it until April 23rd. That day at 5:30 in the morning, Olivia arrived at the Hawthorne estate with something she'd never brought before: a navy blue backpack, heavy, with food, a change of clothes, a sketchbook, and 12 colored pencils. And with her brother, Matthew, hidden in the backseat of the bus they took from Echo Park. Matthew Ramirez was 24 years old, mosaic Down syndrome, moderate functionality, an IQ of 68. In words that he himself had learned to say with pride, "I'm different, not less." He had black hair that was always messy, slanted eyes that sparkled when he smiled, and a particular skill he'd learned working 5 years at a bakery, folding things perfectly: napkins, towels, paper bags. If it could be folded, Matthew folded it like it was origami. Before, Matthew had a routine. He woke up at 7. He ate breakfast with Olivia. At 8, they took the bus together. Olivia got off in Bel Air Crest. Matthew continued to the Polanco Adult Day Care Center, where he spent from 9 in the morning to 6 in the afternoon. There, he had friends, activities, supervision, safety. But on April 1st, the center closed for a month. Urgent renovations, broken pipes, structural problems, and Olivia ran out of options. She couldn't leave Matthew home alone. He needed constant supervision, not because he was incapable, but for safety. Matthew was functional, yes, but he trusted everyone. He opened the door to strangers. He gave out personal information, Once he almost left with someone who promised to take him to see a movie. Hiring a private caregiver cost $4,000 a week. Olivia earned $2,000 a month. She called 3 friends. All 3 were working. None could help. She called a cousin in San Diego. No answer. She tried to ask Mrs. Harding for a month's leave. The response was immediate. If you leave for a month, don't bother coming back. So Olivia did the only thing she could do, the only thing she'd never done. She broke the rule. The first day, Matthew hid in the back pantry. A 10 by 12-foot room full of cleaning supplies, boxes of toilet paper, and shelves with canned goods no one ever used. It had a small window that overlooked the back garden. Natural light, ventilation. Olivia brought him an old cushion, a thermos of water, his sketchbook, and gave him one instruction: don't make any noise. Please, Matthew, not a word. Matthew nodded, serious, as if he understood exactly what was at stake. And for 23 days, Matthew Ramirez became a ghost. He arrived at 5:30 in the morning with Olivia. An hour before the rest of the staff showed up, they entered through the service entrance. Olivia set him up in the pantry, left him breakfast, and went to work. At 10 in the morning, when everyone took their coffee break, Olivia went back to the pantry. 10 minutes. She brought him fruit, checked that he was okay. Matthew was always drawing, or sleeping, or just looking out the window. At 1 in the afternoon, during the staff's lunch break, Olivia brought him food. Another 10 minutes. Matthew ate in silence, smiled, showed her his drawings, the garden seen from the window, the trees, the clouds, birds that never existed, but that he imagined. And at 8 at night, when everyone left, Olivia went back to the pantry. They packed everything up and left through the same door they'd entered. No one knew, no one suspected, except that Matthew couldn't stay still for so long, not because he was restless, but because he had an enormous heart. And when he saw something he could help with, he couldn't help himself. On day 5, while Olivia was working on the second floor, Matthew left the pantry. He saw a basket full of clean, unfolded towels, and he folded them all, perfectly, in thirds, exactly as Mrs. Harding demanded. Olivia almost fainted when she saw them, but no one asked, no one noticed. On day 9, Matthew watered the plants in the back garden. He used the hose carefully, didn't get the floor wet, didn't make any noise. When the gardener arrived, the plants were already perfect. She thought she'd forgotten to do it the day before. On the 14th day, Matthew organized the entire pantry, cleaning supplies by category, canned goods by expiration date, everything mentally labeled in his head, even though he didn't write anything down. And on the 20th day, Matthew saw Olivia cleaning the second-story windows from the outside. She looked tired, really tired. So when she came down to get more cleaning fluid, Matthew slipped out of the pantry, grabbed a rag, and cleaned the 3 downstairs windows facing the garden. When Olivia returned, she almost cried, not from fear, but from gratitude. Matthew didn't understand the risk, but he understood something more important. His sister worked hard, and he could help. For 23 days, Matthew Ramirez was the best employee the Hawthorne estate never knew they had. But there was someone else starting to notice strange things. Edward Hawthorne worked from home on Thursdays, always in his second-floor library, door closed, headphones on, focused. But that morning, May 15th, day 23, something distracted him. He arrived in the library at 9, as usual, but his computer wouldn't turn on. Technical problem. He called support. They told him it would take 2 hours for someone to arrive. So Edward did something he almost never did. He left the library and walked around the house. He passed through the kitchen, empty. He passed through the dining room, clean. He went up to the 3rd floor, everything in order. He came back down, and that's when he heard something, a soft sound, like running water. It was coming from the back garden. He peered out the window and saw something he didn't expect. A young man, maybe in his early 20s, with features that Edward recognized immediately: Down syndrome, watering the plants with a hose, moving carefully, singing a song softly, smiling. Edward froze. Not because there was a stranger in his garden, but because that stranger reminded him of someone. Sebastian, his son, who had died 3 years ago, at 12 years old. Down syndrome, a heart complication that no one could prevent. Sebastian also sang when he did simple tasks. He also smiled for reasons no one else understood. He also had that ability to find joy in the ordinary. Edward felt something break inside his chest, an old crack that had never fully healed. He was going to go outside. He was going to ask who this young man was, but just then he heard footsteps, quick ones. The service door opened, and Olivia ran into the garden. "Matthew," she whispered. Olivia spoke softly, urgently. "You have to go back to the pantry, please, now." Matthew dropped the hose, nodded, and the two of them disappeared through the service door. Edward stood by the window, processing. That was Olivia, his trusted employee, and that young man was someone important to her, someone she was hiding. He should have asked, he should have confronted her, but something stopped him. Maybe the image of Matthew singing, maybe the memory of Sebastian, maybe simple curiosity. So Edward said nothing. He went back to the library, closed the door, but left a crack open, just a couple of inches, just enough to listen. And 3 hours later, that decision would change 3 lives forever. It was 2:30 in the afternoon when Brenda Harding decided to do one of her surprise inspections. She loved doing them, checking every corner, every closet, every pantry, looking for mistakes, looking for excuses to exert control. She checked the kitchen, everything perfect. She checked the bathrooms, impeccable. She went up to the 3rd floor, the bedrooms sparkled, and then she went down to the service area. She opened the back pantry, and there was Matthew, sitting on the cushion, drawing in his notebook, with 12 colored pencils scattered around. Matthew looked up, smiled, said in a soft voice, "Hi, I'm Matthew." Brenda didn't smile. She froze for 2 seconds. And then she shouted, "Who the hell are you? What are you doing here?" Matthew got scared. He dropped the green pencil he was holding. I'm waiting for Olivia." "Olivia?" Brenda left the pantry, slammed the door shut, and shouted down the hallway, "Olivia Ramirez, get in here now!" Olivia was on the 2nd floor cleaning a bathroom. She heard the shout, and she knew it was all over. She walked down the stairs, slowly, as if each step was taking her closer to the edge. When she reached the service hallway, she saw Brenda Harding with her arms crossed, red with anger, and behind her the pantry door slightly open. "Explain yourself." Brenda didn't ask. She ordered. Olivia took a deep breath. "Mrs. Harding, I can explain." "Explain what? Explain that you brought this person into the house without permission?" "He's my brother," Olivia said, her voice firm, even though she was trembling inside. "His adult daycare center closed for a month. I had nowhere to leave him. I couldn't afford a caregiver. I don't care," Brenda interrupted. "I don't care if he's your brother, your cousin, or the President of the United States. The rules are clear. No one brings visitors, ever." "He's not a visitor," Olivia tried to explain. "He hasn't bothered anyone. He just not bothered." Brenda raised her voice. "Do you know the risk we're taking? Do you know what Mr. Hawthorne would say if he knew you brought this? Brenda didn't finish the sentence, but the word hung in the air. Thing. Olivia felt something break inside her. Not anger, something worse. Humiliation. "Please, Mrs. Harding," Olivia whispered. "Just 1 month. 2 more weeks. The center opens on June 1st. Please." Brenda looked at her with contempt. "Fired, now. Pack your things, and get that thing out of my house." And it was at that moment, in that precise second, that Edward Hawthorne emerged from the 2nd floor library. He had heard everything, every word, every insult, every crack in Olivia's voice. And something inside him, something that had been dormant for 3 years, awakened with a fury he didn't know he still possessed. His footsteps echoed on the marble stairs. 1, 2, 3, coming down. Brenda turned around. She paled. Edward Hawthorne didn't shout. He didn't have to. His voice was low, dangerously low. "What did you just say, Brenda?" Brenda stammered. "Mr. Hawthorne, I was—" "Repeat it," Edward said. "The part where you called Olivia's brother a thing. Repeat it. I want to hear it again." Silence. Edward walked to the pantry. He opened the door. Matthew was sitting on the cushion, frightened, with tears in his eyes. Edward looked at him and saw Sebastian. "Hello?" Edward said, his voice soft now. "What's your name?" "Matthew," the young man replied. "Matthew Ramirez." "Nice to meet you, Matthew. I'm Edward. This is my house." Matthew nodded. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to bother anyone. Olivia told me not to make noise." Edward smiled, a sad smile. "You didn't bother anyone, Matthew?" "Not at all." He turned around. Olivia watched Brenda, and what Brenda said next changed the world of 3 people forever. "Brenda, you're fired. If this story is stirring something inside you, if something in your chest is tightening, let me tell you something. You haven't seen anything yet. Because what happened next wasn't just justice, it was redemption." Brenda Harding opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Mr. Hawthorne, I was just—" "Eduardo, now," he repeated. "Get out of my house, now." "Brenda, but I've been working here for 7 years." "Eduardo, and in 7 years, you never learned the most important thing. That rules exist to protect people, not to humiliate them." Brenda attempted to speak again. Eduardo raised his hand. "Eduardo, leave. I don't want to see you again. Ever." Brenda left, without collecting anything, without saying goodbye. She just left. Olivia was in shock, frozen. She didn't understand what had just happened. Eduardo turned to her. "Eduardo, Olivia, can you come with me for a moment?" She nodded, mute. "Eduardo, Matthew, can you wait here for us? Don't worry, everything is all right." Matthew nodded too, confused but calm. Eduardo and Olivia walked to the main living room. They sat down, and for the first time in 3 years, Eduardo Hawthorne spoke about his son. "Eduardo, Olivia," he began, "I need to tell you something." And he told her about Sebastian, about the diagnosis, about 12 years of pure joy, about the nights in the hospital, about the day his heart simply stopped beating, about the emptiness that never went away. When he finished, he had tears in his eyes. Olivia did too. "Olivia, I didn't know, Mr. Hawthorne," she whispered. Eduardo shook his head. "Eduardo, you didn't need to know. But now that you do, understand this. When I heard Brenda call your brother a thing, I didn't just hear her insult him. I heard her insult my son. And I'm not going to allow that, ever." Olivia cried, not out of fear, out of relief, out of gratitude, out of something that had no name. Eduardo continued. "Eduardo, I want Matthew to come here every day. Here, to this house, not hidden away. Officially." Olivia looked up. "Olivia, what?" "Eduardo, he has something to offer. I saw the folded towels. I saw the watered plants. I saw the organized pantry. Matthew has talent, and he deserves to be recognized for it." Olivia, "But Mr. Hawthorne, I can't." Eduardo, "Yes, you can," said Eduardo, "and you will. Your salary is now $6,000, 3 times more, and Matthew will receive $750 a month. It's not charity, Olivia. It's fair pay for work well done." Olivia couldn't speak. She just cried. "Eduardo, and there's one more thing," Eduardo added. "Starting today, I want to create a policy in my entire hotel chain, 120 properties. If any employee needs to bring a family member with a disability because they have no other options, they can do so with supervision, with dignity, with respect." Olivia looked at him as if she was seeing a miracle, and maybe she was. But miracles don't end when they are declared. They begin there. The next day, May 16th, Olivia and Matthew arrived at the Hawthorne estate at 6 in the morning. As always, but this time, Matthew didn't enter through the service entrance hidden in the shadows. He entered through the front door. Eduardo was waiting for them, freshly brewed coffee, 3 cups, 1 for him, 1 for Olivia, and 1 for Matthew, with milk and 2 teaspoons of sugar. Exactly how he liked it. Eduardo. "Welcome," Eduardo said. "This is your home." Matthew smiled. Big, genuine. Matthew. "Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne." Eduardo. "Just Eduardo," he replied. "We're a team now." And so began something that no one in that house expected. A transformation, not just of routines, of hearts. The first few days were strange. The cook, Don Miguel, looked at Matthew with suspicion. The gardener, Thomas, didn't know how to talk to him. The cleaning assistant, Rosa, avoided eye contact. But Matthew didn't notice these things. Or if he did notice them, he didn't care. He just did what he did best, help. The first day, he folded 47 towels, perfectly, in thirds, without anyone asking him to. The second day, he organized the pantry where he had spent 23 days hiding. This time, not out of fear, but out of love for order. The third day, he helped Thomas water the garden. At first, Thomas didn't speak to him, but after 20 minutes of watching Matthew work, carefully watering each plant, singing while he did it, something changed. Thomas. "Hey, Matthew," Thomas said. "Do you know what these plants are?" Matthew shook his head. Thomas. "They're bougainvilleas," Thomas explained. "They need water twice a week, no more. Can you help me remember that?" Matthew nodded. Matthew. "Sure. Twice. Wednesday and Saturday. I'll remember it." And he remembered it. Every week, without fail. The fourth day, while Olivia cleaned the kitchen, Don Miguel was preparing lunch. Baked chicken with vegetables. Matthew stood watching from the doorway. "Don Miguel, want to help?" Don Miguel asked, more out of politeness than conviction. Matthew entered. Matthew. "Yes, please." Miguel showed him how to wash the vegetables, how to cut them. Not with a knife, that was dangerous, but with his hands, tearing lettuce, separating broccoli florets. Matthew did it slowly, with absolute concentration, as if each leaf of lettuce were a work of art. When he finished, Miguel looked at him differently. "Miguel, you did well, kid." Matthew beamed. Matthew. "Thank you, Don Miguel. Can I help tomorrow too?" Miguel nodded. Miguel. "Sure you can." And so, day after day, Matthew won over each person in that house. Not with complicated words, not with extraordinary efforts, just by being himself. Kind, hard-working, present. But there was someone who observed all this with a mixture of wonder and pain. Eduardo. Because every time he saw Matthew smile, he saw Sebastian. Every time Matthew sang while he worked, Eduardo remembered the mornings when Sebastian sang made-up songs while he ate breakfast. Every time Matthew asked how to help, Eduardo remembered how Sebastian always wanted to be useful, even if he didn't know exactly how. And one night, 2 weeks after Matthew started officially, Eduardo broke down. He was in his library, alone, looking at a photo of Sebastian that he kept in his desk drawer, a photo from his 10th birthday, Sebastian wearing a party hat, blowing out a candle, smiling. Eduardo cried. For the first time in 3 years, he cried for real, not out of pure sadness, out of something more complex, sadness mixed with gratitude, pain mixed with hope. Because Matthew wasn't Sebastian, he never would be, but his presence was healing something that Eduardo thought would never heal. And it was in that moment that he understood something. Sebastian hadn't died for nothing. He had lived to teach Eduardo what really mattered. And now Matthew was reminding him of that lesson, that people aren't valued for what they produce. They're valued for the great show they are. The next day, Eduardo did something he hadn't done in years. He went down to the kitchen at the staff's breakfast time, 7 in the morning. Everyone was there. Olivia, Matthew, Don Miguel, Thomas, Rosa. She sat down and had breakfast with them. They talked about simple things, the weather, the plants in the garden, Don Miguel's recipe for refried beans. Matthew told a joke that made absolutely no sense. Everyone laughed anyway, and Eduardo realized something. At that table, in that kitchen, there was more life than in the last 3 years of solitary dinners in the main dining room. But not everything was easy. There were days when Matthew got frustrated, when he didn't understand an instruction, when he forgot something, when things didn't come out perfectly. One day, he tried to help Rosa clean a large mirror in the foyer, but he used too much cleaner. The mirror was covered in white streaks. Matthew sat down on the floor and cried. Olivia rushed to comfort him. "It's okay, Matthew. We can clean it again." "But I wanted to do it right." Matthew sobbed. "Like you, like Don Miguel, like everyone." Eduardo was there. He saw everything. He approached. He sat on the floor next to Matthew. "Matthew, do you know how many times I mess up at work?" Eduardo asked. Matthew looked up, teary-eyed. "You mess up?" "All the time," Eduardo replied. "Just last week, I made a decision that cost my company $200,000. I messed up, badly. But you know what I did next?" "What?" "I fixed it, I learned, and I moved on." That's what people who are worth something do. They don't give up. They try again. Matthew nodded, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. "Will you show me how to clean the mirror right?" Eduardo smiled. "Of course I will." And for 15 minutes, a millionaire CEO and a young man with Down syndrome cleaned a mirror together. When they were done, the mirror shined, but something else shined too. Matthew's smile. And it was right after that moment, when Eduardo was returning to his library, that Rosa approached him, timidly. "Mr. Hawthorne, can I tell you something?" "Of course, Rosa. I have a cousin with cerebral palsy. He lives with my aunt. She's older. She can't take care of him well. And I never thought I could bring him here." "But since you said that," Eduardo interrupted her with a smile. "How old is your cousin?" 19. "Does he need constant supervision?" "No, just company and something to do." Eduardo nodded. "Bring him tomorrow. We'll find him something to do. Something he likes." Rosa almost cried. "Thank you, sir, thank you." And that's when Eduardo understood that what had begun as an act of justice for Olivia and Matthew was turning into something much bigger, a movement. Because 3 days later, Thomas asked if he could bring his niece, 8 years old, autistic, non-verbal. Her sister worked double shifts, and the girl spent hours alone with the TV on. And Don Miguel asked if he could bring his mother-in-law, 74 years old, early dementia. She needed company, someone to watch over her while he worked. Eduardo said yes to everyone. And suddenly the Hawthorne estate stopped being just an empty mansion. It became something more, a haven, a family, a place where vulnerable people weren't hidden. They were seen. But there was someone else who was watching all of this. Someone Eduardo didn't expect. Brenda Harding. Since she was fired, Brenda had been unemployed. No family in Bel Air Crest wanted to hire her. Word had gotten around. Brenda Harding was fired from the Hawthorne estate. They say she was cruel to an employee. Nobody wanted to take the risk. For 4 weeks, Brenda looked for work. Nothing. She burned through her savings. She had to move to a cheaper apartment. She stopped paying for her gym membership. Her life of perfect control crumbled. And one afternoon, desperate, she did something she never thought she would do. She knocked on the door of the Hawthorne estate. Eduardo opened it. He saw her, and he knew exactly why she was there. Brenda didn't look him in the eye. "Mr. Hawthorne, I came to—" "You don't have to explain," Eduardo said. "I know why you're here." Brenda swallowed hard. "I don't expect you to give me my job back. I just want to apologize. To you, to Olivia, to Matthew. What I did was unforgivable." Eduardo looked at her for a long time, processing. "Did you learn anything, Brenda?" She nodded, her voice cracking. I learned that rules without a heart are cruelty. I learned that control isn't the same as leadership. I learned that people are worth more than protocols. Eduardo nodded. Good. That's a start. Brenda looked up, surprised. I'm not going to give you your job back, Eduardo clarified, but I am going to give you an opportunity. I have a new project, a pilot program in one of my hotels. I need someone to train the staff about inclusion, about empathy, about how to work with employees who bring vulnerable family members. Brenda blinked. Me? Yes, you. Because nobody understands the pain of a lack of empathy better than someone who caused it and lost everything because of it. Brenda cried. Not manipulative tears, real tears of shame, of gratitude, of unexpected redemption. I won't fail you, she whispered. I hope not, Eduardo replied, because this time there won't be a second chance. And so, even the antagonist of this story found a path forward. What would you have done in Eduardo's place? Would you have forgiven someone who humiliated a vulnerable person? Don't lie. Really think about it. Because forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the greatest strength that exists. But let's go back to Olivia. Because there was something she had been keeping, something nobody knew, not even Eduardo, a notebook. During the 23 days that Matthew was hidden, Olivia had documented everything, and every day, every moment, every fear, every small victory. It was a navy blue notebook, 120 pages, with small, tight handwriting, as if Olivia wanted to capture every detail before it escaped. The first entry read, Day 1, April 23rd. Today, I broke the most important rule. I brought Matthew with me. I'm terrified, but I'm more terrified of leaving him alone. If we're discovered, we lose everything. But if something happens to him because I left him alone, I lose myself. The entry for day 5 read, Matthew folded the towels while I was upstairs. I almost fainted, but nobody noticed. Maybe we can do it. The entry for day 14 read, Matthew organized the pantry, everything perfect, as if he had worked here his whole life. Sometimes I forget that the world sees him differently. To me, he has always been perfect. And the last entry, day 23, May 15th. We were discovered. Mrs. Harding shouted horrible things. I'm fired. But then something happened that I don't understand. Mr. Hawthorne defended Matthew. He defended us. He said we can stay. Both of us. I don't know if I'm dreaming, but if I am, I don't want to wake up. Olivia never planned to show that notebook to anyone. It was her private refuge, the way she processed fear and hope. But one afternoon, while cleaning the library, the notebook slipped from her bag. Edward saw it. He picked it up. He was going to return it without asking. But then he saw the first words on the cover, written in black marker, 23 days of fear, 23 days of love, 23 days of Matthew. Edward looked at Olivia. May I? Olivia hesitated, then nodded. Edward read every page, every word, every entry. When he finished, he had tears in his eyes again. Olivia, this is incredible. Olivia blushed. It's just a notebook. No, Edward insisted. This is a testament. This is proof that love makes the impossible possible, and I need more people to see it. Olivia frowned. What do you mean? Edward smiled. I'm going to publish it, with your permission. Not the whole thing, but fragments, in our company's inclusion policy manual, so that every manager, every employee understands why these policies matter, so they see that behind every rule, there are real people with real fears and real love. Olivia didn't know what to say. Would you use your real name? Edward asked. Olivia thought, then nodded. Yes, I want people to know that this happened, that Matthew is real, that people like him deserve to be seen. Edward extended his hand. Deal. Olivia shook it. And so, a notebook written in fear became a tool of hope. But there was one more thing, something that neither Edward nor Olivia knew. Tom, the gardener, had recorded a video. On day 20, when Matthew helped clean the windows, Tom had seen him from the garden, and without anyone knowing, he'd taken out his cell phone and recorded 34 seconds. In the video, Matthew was seen cleaning a window, slowly, carefully, singing softly, smiling even though no one was watching. Tom never knew what to do with that video, but when he saw everything that happened afterward, when he saw Edward defend Matthew, when he saw the transformation of the Hawthorne estate, he knew that video meant something. He showed it to Edward one afternoon. "Mr. Hawthorne, I recorded this before you knew Matthew was here. I thought you should see it." Edward watched the video and broke down for the third time, because in those 34 seconds, he saw everything that Olivia had described in her notebook. He saw the love. He saw the dedication. He saw the purity of someone who was helping without expecting anything in return. "Can I keep this?" Edward asked. Tom nodded. "It's yours." Edward saved that video, and every time he doubted himself, every time he thought that maybe he'd made the wrong decision, he watched it and remembered why he did it. Because in a world obsessed with productivity, with rules, with control, Matthew was a reminder of something simpler and deeper, that a person's worth isn't measured by what they do, it's measured by who they are. And Matthew was someone who was worth everything. 3 months after the day that everything changed, Edward Hawthorne did something he never thought he would do. He called an emergency meeting with the managers of his 120 hotels. Not a video call, not a corporate memo, an in-person meeting. At the largest hotel in the chain, New York City, main ballroom, 200 people. The managers arrived confused. They thought there would be layoffs, restructuring, something bad. But when they entered the ballroom, they saw something completely different. On stage, there was a giant screen, and on that screen, a presentation with a title that no one expected. The Family Dignity Program, Corporate Policy 2025, Inclusion Without Exception. Edward walked onto the stage without notes, without a teleprompter, just him and his story. 3 months ago, he began, I fired my head housekeeper, a woman who worked for me for 7 years. I fired her because she humiliated an employee for bringing her brother with Down syndrome to work. And yes, the employee broke the rules, but the rules were wrong. The ballroom fell silent. Edward continued, Today, I want to introduce you to 2 people who changed my life and are going to change this company. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight illuminated the left side of the stage. Olivia and Matthew walked in, nervous. Matthew held Olivia's hand. The ballroom didn't know how to react. Some timid applause, confusion. Edward walked toward them, shook their hands, and began to tell the story. Not the corporate version, the real version. The 23 days, the fear, the humiliation, the notebook, the 34-second video, everything. When he finished, half the ballroom was crying. And then Edward said something that no one expected. Starting today, all of our hotels will implement the Family Dignity Program. If any employee, no matter their level, needs to bring a family member with a disability, chronic illness, or vulnerable situation, they can do so with 3 conditions. First, notify the manager 48 hours in advance. Second, the vulnerable person must have adequate supervision. Third, there must be an activity plan that benefits both the person and the hotel. A manager raised his hand. Mr. Hawthorne, what if that affects productivity? Edward looked at him directly. That's exactly the wrong question. The right question is, what if not doing it is destroying lives? The manager lowered his gaze. Edward continued, In the last 3 months at my estate, we've had Matthew, Rosa's cousin with cerebral palsy, Tom's niece with autism, Don Miguel's mother-in-law with dementia. You know what happened? Silence. Productivity didn't go down. It went up. Because when your team knows you care about them as people, not just as employees. They give their all and more. Some managers nodded, others remained skeptical. Edward projected a video on the screen. It was the video that Tom had recorded. 34 seconds of Matthew cleaning a window, singing, smiling, alone. When the video ended, Edward said, "This young man has Down syndrome, an IQ of 68. The world tells him he's worth less. But in 3 months, he taught me more about leadership than all the business books I've ever read." Matthew looked up, surprised. Edward smiled at him, and then Edward showed something else. Fragments from Olivia's notebook, projected on the screen. The most painful entries, the most hopeful. Day 1, "I'm terrified." Day 5, "Maybe we can do this." Day 23, "He defended us, didn't." When it was over, there wasn't a dry eye in that ballroom. Edward closed with this. This program isn't charity, it's strategy. Because companies that take care of their people not only retain talent, they multiply it. And today, all of you are going to be part of that change. The meeting ended, but something had changed. Some managers approached Olivia and Matthew, asked them questions, thanked them. One of them, a manager from Phoenix, Arizona, said to Edward, "Sir, I have a daughter, 12 years old, muscular dystrophy. My wife had to leave her job to care for her. We're struggling. Can I really do this?" Edward cut him off with a hug. "Yes, you can, and you will. If at this moment you don't feel something in your chest, if there isn't a lump in your throat, then you aren't paying attention. Because this isn't just a story. It's a silent revolution, and it's happening right now." 2 weeks after the first hotel in San Diego, the program expanded to Scottsdale, then Phoenix, Las Vegas, Palm Springs, Santa Barbara. Within 6 months, 47 out of 120 hotels had implemented the entire program, and the results were overwhelming. 89 families were bringing their loved ones to work. A child with autism, a mother with Alzheimer's, a husband with multiple sclerosis, a daughter with Down syndrome, a brother with cerebral palsy. Employee turnover dropped 34% because people no longer had to choose between work and family. Productivity went up 12% because employees without anxiety work better. And something that no one measured, but everyone felt, happiness increased. But there was someone else who noticed all of this. Someone who was watching from the outside. A journalist named Sarah Miller. Sarah worked for one of the biggest newspapers in the United States, an investigative reporter, a skeptic by nature. She didn't believe in feel-good corporate stories, but she'd heard rumors about Edward Hawthorne and his strange program. She decided to investigate. She called Edward, asked for an interview. Edward agreed. Sarah arrived at the Hawthorne estate on a Tuesday afternoon. She expected to find a PR operation, something fake, rehearsed. But what she found was completely different. Matthew opened the door, a giant smile. "Hi, I'm Matthew. Are you here to see Mr. Hawthorne?" Sarah blinked. Yes. Come on in. I made snickerdoodle cookies with Mr. Johnson today. Would you like to try one?" And before the interview even started, Sarah was in the kitchen, eating snickerdoodles made by a young man with Down syndrome, listening to Mr. Johnson explain how Matthew had learned to knead the dough, watching Olivia work without drama, without cameras, without pretense. When she finally sat down with Edward, Sarah already knew that this wasn't just a corporate story. It was something real. The interview lasted 2 hours. Edward told her everything: the notebook, the 34-second video, the 23 days, the humiliation, the decision. Sarah asked tough questions. She looked for cracks. She didn't find any. In the end, she asked, "Why? What do you gain from all of this?" Edward looked at her directly. "I gain the ability to sleep in peace. I get to see my son in every person we help. I get to know that when I die, I left something that matters more than money. Sarah wrote the article. It was published 2 weeks later. Front page, 4 full pages. Photos of Matthew working, of Olivia cleaning, of the notebook. Headline: The Millionaire Who Learned Humanity from an Employee and Her Brother with Down Syndrome. The article went viral, not just on social media, in serious media, television, radio, international magazines. Edward received hundreds of calls. Other companies wanted to implement the program. Organizations were asking for advice. Families were looking for hope. And then something happened that no one expected. The government got involved. A congresswoman named Jessica Thompson read the article. She had a son with autism. She understood the struggle. She proposed a bill, the Family Inclusion in the Workplace Act, based directly on Edward's program. The law took 8 months to pass, but when it did, it changed the United States. Now, any company with more than 50 employees had to offer family inclusion options. Participation wasn't mandatory, but the option had to exist. Edward was invited to Congress when the law was signed. He brought Olivia and Matthew. When their names were announced, Matthew walked to the front, and when they gave him the microphone, he said something that the entire Congress would remember forever. My name is Matthew Ramirez. I have Down syndrome, and I want to say that I'm not different bad, I'm different good, and we all deserve to work. We all deserve to be seen. Thank you. Congress stood up. Applause that lasted 4 minutes. Olivia was crying, Edward was crying, Matthew was smiling, because finally, after 24 years of being invisible to the world, Matthew Ramirez was seen. But there was something else, something that Matthew did during all those months, something that no one asked him to do: draw. Matthew loved to draw since he was a kid, but in the last 6 months, he changed his focus. He stopped drawing imaginary things and started drawing what he saw every day: the garden at the Hawthorne estate, the bougainvilleas that Thomas taught him to water, the mirror he cleaned with Edward, the kitchen where Mr. Johnson taught him to cook, Olivia working, Edward reading. In 6 months, Matthew created 47 drawings. Olivia kept them in a folder. She thought they were private, a memory, but Edward had another idea. One afternoon, he asked for the folder. He took it to a friend. An art curator, a designer. He showed him the drawings without any context. The curator looked at them, one by one, slowly. When he finished, he said, "These are good, not good for Down syndrome. Good, period. I would exhibit them without hesitation." Edward smiled, and so 2 months later, in a small gallery in Soho, Matthew Ramirez's first exhibition opened, title 47 Days of Gratitude, not 23, because the first 23 were filled with fear, but the 47 that came after were filled with something more beautiful: gratitude, belonging, love. The opening was on a Thursday evening. Edward invited everyone: Olivia, Mr. Johnson, Thomas, Rose, the managers, Sarah Miller, and Brenda Harding. When Brenda arrived, she saw Matthew surrounded by people, admiring his art, treating him like an artist, not just someone with Down syndrome. Brenda approached timidly. "Matthew, can I talk to you?" Matthew looked at her. He recognized her, and instead of anger, he smiled. "Hi, Mrs. Harding. Do you like my drawings?" Brenda couldn't speak for 3 seconds. Then, in a broken voice, "They're beautiful. You're beautiful, and I am so sorry." Matthew didn't completely understand, but he understood apologies. He extended his hand. "It's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. Mr. Hawthorne taught me that." Brenda shook his hand and cried. That night, 12 drawings were sold. Prices ranged from $2,000 to $3,500. Total, $31,750. Edward gave all the money to Matthew, minus the 30% for the curator. Matthew received $22,225. the most money he had ever seen in his life. Olivia almost fainted. Matthew didn't understand the exact numbers, but he understood something more important. His work had value. Edward asked, "Matthew, what do you want to do with this money?" Matthew thought for a long time. Then he said, "I want to help." "That's how you helped. I want others like me to be able to work too." And that's how the Matthew Ramirez Foundation was born, initially funded with the $88 to $900 from the art sale, focused on job training for people with Down syndrome. First year, 23 people trained, the same number of days Matthew was hidden. Second year, 47 people, the number of drawings. Third year, 120 people, the number of Eduardo's hotels, and each graduate received something special, a certificate and a framed copy of Matthew's favorite drawing, the one of the garden with bougainvillea, because that garden represented something, a place where someone vulnerable was seen, cared for, valued. That's what the foundation promised, to be that garden for others. 3 years after that Thursday, May 15th, Olivia, Matthew, and Eduardo sat in the garden of the Hawthorne estate. It was a Sunday afternoon. The sun was setting softly among the bougainvillea. Thomas was watering the plants. Miguel was making coffee in the kitchen. Rosa was cleaning and singing. And for the first time in a long time, the three of them simply existed, without rush, without fear, without needing to hide. "Mr. Hawthorne," Matthew said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, Matthew. Why did you help us when Mrs. Harding was going to kick us out?" "Why?" Eduardo looked at Matthew, then at Olivia, then at the garden. "Because I had a son who was like you, and when he died, I thought I'd never feel the way I felt when I was with him again. But then I met you, and you reminded me of something I'd forgotten." "What?" Matthew asked. "That love isn't lost when someone's gone. It just changes shape. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it comes back in the person you least expect." Matthew smiled. "Like your son." "Sebastian? Like my son, Sebastian," Eduardo confirmed. "Exactly." Olivia wiped away a tear. "Thank you, sir, for everything." Eduardo shook his head. "No, thank you. You saved me, not the other way around." And in that moment, in that garden, 3 people whom fate had brought together in the most improbable way understood something fundamental, that the greatest stories aren't written in palaces or corporations. They're written in kitchens, in pantries, in gardens, in places where ordinary people do extraordinary things without realizing it. Matthew continued to work at the Hawthorne estate, not as a hidden employee, as part of the family. Olivia was promoted to personnel coordinator for the entire hotel chain, salary of $36,000, responsible for implementing the Family Dignity Program in all 120 hotels. Eduardo reduced his working hours from 14 hours a day to 8, hired a co-CEO, and dedicated the rest of his time to the foundation and to having breakfast with Olivia and Matthew. Every morning, Brenda Harding became the main trainer for the program. She traveled throughout Mexico teaching managers about empathy, about inclusion, about how rules without a heart are cruelty. And every time she gave a training, she started with the same phrase: "I was the villain in this story, but I was given a second chance. And today, I'm here to make sure no one else makes my mistake." The Hawthorne estate was transformed. It was no longer an empty mansion. It was a refuge, a family, a place where 6 vulnerable people went every day, helped, worked, belonged. And every time someone visited and asked why there were so many different people in such an elegant house, Eduardo replied the same thing: because true elegance isn't in the marble, it's in the humanity. 5 years later, the Family Dignity Program was implemented in 800 companies in Mexico. 12,000 families were participating, 12,000 vulnerable people who no longer had to hide. The Matthew Ramirez Foundation had trained 450 people with Down syndrome. 340 of them were working with salaries, with dignity, with real contracts. And Matthew, at 29 years old, was something he never thought he'd be: a recognized artist, an activist, a symbol that different isn't less. But more than all that, Matthew was simply Matthew, someone who folded towels perfectly, who watered bougainvillea on Wednesdays and Saturdays, who made sweet bread with Miguel, who drew gardens, who smiled when no one was watching, someone who had spent 23 days hidden in a pantry, and who was now seen by an entire country. This story began with an injustice, a cruel word, a humiliation, but it ended with something much more powerful: a law, a foundation, a movement. 12,000 lives changed, and all because 3 people decided on something simple but revolutionary. They decided to see beyond the rules, beyond the differences, beyond the fear. See a human being who deserved dignity, who deserved work, who deserved love. And when they finally saw him, the world changed. Not overnight, not with shouts or violence, but with something much quieter and much stronger, with a notebook, with 34 seconds of video, with 47 drawings, with towels folded in thirds, with bougainvillea watered with love, with small acts that became great movements. You have 2 options now. You can close this story and forget it, leave it in the past as a nice anecdote. Or you can do something different. You can look around you and ask yourself, who am I? Not seeing? Who's hiding in my life, waiting to be seen? Maybe it's a co-worker, a neighbor, a relative, someone different, someone vulnerable, someone the world says is worth less. And you can decide to see them, not with pity, not with charity, but with what Matthew always deserved: with humanity, with respect, with the absolute certainty that their life matters as much as yours. Because in the end, that's what this story really teaches: that there are no special people and ordinary people. There are only people who see and people who don't. Which one are you going to be? This is the story of Olivia Ramirez, who broke a rule for love; of Matthew Ramirez, who never stopped smiling, even when the world didn't see him; and of Eduardo Hawthorne, who learned that the best investment a millionaire can make isn't in the stock market. It's in seeing someone everyone else ignores and saying, you matter, you're worth it, you deserve to be here. 3 people, 23 days of fear, 47 days of gratitude, 12,000 lives changed. One simple lesson: love always, always finds a way, even when it starts hidden in a pantry.